Now, let us begin. There comes a moment in every spiritual life when the familiar ground beneath our feet gives way, and we find ourselves standing upon an entirely different foundation than the one we had trusted before. And it was such a moment, quiet, unannounced, without thunder or lightning, that changed the entire course of my life and became the beginning of what you now call the infinite way. I did not arrive at it through years of study, nor through any superior discipline of the mind. It was given in a way that defies explanation, and yet its truth has proven itself over and over again in every corner of human experience. And the revelation was simply this: you never had a problem, not that your problems were solved, not that they were diminished, not that they were made easier to bear, but that in the light of spiritual reality, they had never existed as powers, as forces, as actualities. You see, the world is forever teaching us to examine, to analyze, to resist, and to wrestle with appearances. And because of this, we come to believe that a problem is something outside ourselves, pressing upon us, demanding our energy, our strength, our ingenuity. But the truth that came in that sacred moment revealed a very different picture. It showed that what we have been calling problems are nothing more than shadows cast by a false belief, a belief in a power apart from God, a presence that is not the presence. And the moment that belief is dissolved in the recognition of one power, one presence, one life, the shadow disappears, for it never had substance of its own. I would like you, as we begin this time together, to let this truth rest gently upon your consciousness. Do not try to grasp it with the intellect, for the intellect will immediately protest, will demand explanations and proofs and logical demonstrations. Do not engage it on that level. Simply listen, quietly, as though you were listening to a breeze moving across the surface of still water. Let it be an impartation, for the revelation that you never had a problem is not something to be reasoned out. It is something to be perceived inwardly, spiritually, silently, and if you will allow it, even now, something within you will begin to respond not to my words, but to the presence that stands behind the words, the presence that has no opposite. You may have come today burdened, perhaps with fear for the body, concern over supply, anxiety about time, or unrest over world events. These are the universal pressures that beset every individual born into the belief of material existence. But before we go one step further, let me assure you, the moment this truth dawns in you, the moment you sense even faintly that God is the only power operating in your life, something begins to loosen, to soften, to fall away, not because you have overcome a problem, but because you have recognized that there is no power opposing the infinite. And this simple, profound recognition is the beginning of all healing, all peace, all freedom. So let us go forward gently, reverently, with the awareness that we are not here to acquire something, nor to add something to ourselves, nor even to improve our human condition. We are here to awaken to what already is, what has always been, what will forever be, the unopposed, uninterrupted, ever-present activity of God as the very essence of our being. And when this is seen, truly seen, you will know as I came to know. You never had a problem. Let us look now, quietly and honestly, at what we call the human condition, for unless we understand what the world believes, we cannot perceive why the revelation you never had a problem is so transforming. When we speak of problems, we are not speaking of anything abstract or distant. We are speaking of the very storms that sweep through human life: illness in the body, lack in the purse, pressure in the schedule, and the restless turbulence of world events. These are the experiences that seem to rise like waves and throw us off our center. And it is because humanity has accepted these waves as powers that the sense of fear persists. You see, the human mind is forever declaring its allegiance to what I call the four temporal kingdoms: the kingdom of the body, the kingdom of supply, the kingdom of time, and the kingdom of external forces. Each one claims dominion. Each one whispers its threats. Each one demands that you bow before it. And because the world has believed in these kingdoms for centuries, humanity has come to accept them as ultimate reality. When the body aches or falters, the world tells you that you are at the mercy of matter, that you are flesh and blood subject to decay, to laws that operate independently of God. When supply appears limited, the world insists that your security lies in bank accounts, in salaries, in opportunities that can be given or taken away by human hands. When time presses, the world convinces you that you are caught in a relentless march of hours and days, lacking the very substance you need to live your life. And when nations tremble, when headlines scream, when forces larger than yourself seem to shake the foundations of the earth, the world persuades you that you are a small being in a vast, uncontrollable universe. And because this is the universal belief, humanity suffers not from actual powers, but from the acceptance of these appearances as powers. Now listen carefully. This is the very atmosphere into which the spiritual message must come. This is the storm in which the Christ light must be recognized. The infinite way does not begin in peaceful gardens. It begins in the midst of the world's turbulence, in the very heart of the human turmoil, for it is precisely there that the false sense of power reveals itself, and precisely there that the presence within you declares itself as the only reality. When you feel fear in your body, or anxiety over your finances, or the weight of time, or dread over world conditions, it is not because there is an actual power acting upon you. It is because the mind has accepted a secondary power, a second presence, a rival to God. And it is this belief, and only this belief, that produces the storm. But remember this: the storm is never the truth. It is never the reality. It is an appearance, a shadow cast by the belief in two powers. And when you turn from the appearance, even for a moment, and acknowledge within yourself that God is the only presence and the only power, the shadow begins to thin, to weaken, to dissolve, not because you have fought it, not because you have resisted it, but because it cannot stand in the light of recognition. You may feel that your particular storm is unique, that others may find peace, but your situation is somehow different. Yet I tell you lovingly, gently, firmly, there is no storm that has authority over the one who abides in the secret place of the Most High. There is no condition that can impose itself upon the one who has awakened to the principle of oneness. And it is this principle, this eternal truth, that begins to dawn in us when we understand the nature of the human condition and the unreality of the powers it claims. So we look upon these storms, not with fear, not with resistance, not with desperate prayer, but with the quiet assurance that whatever has a beginning in human belief must have an ending in spiritual realization. And in that assurance, we begin to glimpse the light behind the clouds. We begin to sense that the one who walks through the storms of the world is untouched by them. We begin to hear, perhaps faintly at first, the whisper of the inner voice saying, "Be not afraid, it is I." And from this recognition, the journey begins. And now, having looked at the storms that human experience brings, let us turn to a moment in my own journey that became the gateway to the revelation we are exploring together. For spiritual truth, as you know, rarely breaks upon us in times of ease. It comes when every human refuge has been exhausted, when even our most cherished methods no longer function, when the mind reaches a point of helplessness. And it was precisely in such a moment that the infinite way found its birth. For many years I had been serving as a practitioner, receiving calls from morning until night, from the ill, the fearful, the lonely, the troubled. They came seeking help, and the remarkable thing was that help often came, healings occurred, discord dissolved, harmony appeared, yet even in the midst of this activity, there was a gnawing question, a subtle dissatisfaction. Why do the same problems return? Why does the individual who has been healed of disease now return with lack? Why does the one delivered from fear now appear with resentment or guilt? What is it that keeps the wheel of human suffering in motion? You see, I had come to a point where the repetition itself was speaking louder than the individual cases. It was as if life was saying, "You are not yet touching the principle. You are still dealing with effects," and there arose within me a deep, nearly overwhelming weariness, not a physical weariness, but a spiritual hunger that no amount of successful demonstration could satisfy. For I began to sense that as long as one is working with conditions, one is still on the surface of life, still moving pieces upon a board without touching the invisible cause behind them. There came a day when the calls felt heavier than ever, not because of their number, but because I could no longer bear the illusion that anything external needed healing. I could no longer believe that supply or health or relationship or circumstance had any inherent power to disturb or to restore. And yet, lacking the principle that explained this, I found myself in a kind of inner darkness, a silence in which all my old methods failed me. The prayers I had known were empty. The affirmations were lifeless. Even the scripture felt flat, as though the spirit had withdrawn its light. Now understand this. Such a moment is not a punishment, not a sign of failure, but a sacred threshold. When the mind reaches its limit, when all personal effort is spent, when the human sense of self stands stripped of its tools and formulas, then, only then, does one become receptive to the impartation of the Spirit. And so it was in that quiet desperation, in that profound helplessness, that a spontaneous prayer arose from the depths of my being. It was not a prayer of words. It was not even a prayer addressed to God as something apart. It was a simple, silent yearning. Father, show me the principle. Show me what stands behind healing, behind harmony, behind all true activity. And in that moment of surrender, a stillness came, not the stillness of fatigue, but the stillness that precedes revelation. I knew nothing, yet I felt everything. I expected nothing, yet something within me recognized that the answer was already present. There was no struggle, no pleading, no mental reaching. There was only a vast, open receptivity, and into that receptivity, the light began to dawn. I did not know it then, but I had been brought to the threshold of truth by the very crisis I sought to avoid. Human insufficiency had become the doorway to spiritual vision. The failure of personal effort had prepared the mind to receive that which cannot be given through thought. And it was there, in that inner emptiness, that the revelation would come, not as a thought to be remembered, but as a living presence to be known. We come now to that moment, and now we come to that sacred moment. The moment when the veil thinned and the truth that had been seeking me broke through, not with fanfare, not with excitement, but with the quiet certainty of something eternally present, waiting only to be recognized. I had laid down every tool, every method, every attempt to bring about a healing. I had released even the desire to know how truth works, and into that silence, into that emptiness, into that great yielding, the revelation came not as words, not as a teaching, but as an inner certainty so clear that no argument of the world could ever again shake it. The revelation was simply this: there is no problem. That which you have been trying to heal, to correct, to solve, does not exist as an entity, as a condition, as a power. It exists only as a belief in something other than God, in a presence apart from the presence, in a force that stands outside the one. And the instant this was seen, deeply and wholly, the entire structure of human fear collapsed. For if God is infinite, if God is all, if God is the only presence and the only power, then there is no place where a second power can stand. There is no room for disease. There is no room for lack. There is no room for fear. They are appearances, nothing more. It was as though I had been standing in a darkened room, attempting to push the darkness out through the window, trying desperately to sweep it away, only to discover that the moment a light is lit, the darkness cannot remain, not because it has been defeated, but because it never had substance. Darkness is not a thing, it is the absence of something. So too, with every human problem, they are not things to be solved. They are the absence of the realization of one power. In that moment I understood why the problems returned, why the healings were temporary, why the same fears reappeared in new forms. I had been attempting to deal with shadows, and when one shadow is removed, another can appear. So long as we continue to believe that shadows possess form or force. But once you see that the shadow has no life apart from the light that casts it, you cease to deal with shadows altogether. You turn toward the light, and the light, in this case, is the living realization of God as the only presence, the only power, the only life, the only substance, the only cause. Once this is seen even faintly, the so-called problem dissolves, not through effort, but through the simple impossibility of standing where it has no foundation. You are not overcoming anything. You are not resisting anything. You are not changing anything. You are merely recognizing what already is, that nothing exists that can oppose the infinite. This revelation did not come as an intellectual conclusion. It was not the result of reasoning. It was an impartation, a direct knowing from within, and with it came the immediate understanding that all spiritual healing rests upon this one principle: there is only God. Everything that appears as a problem, a condition, a discord, is merely the belief that something else has power, and the moment that belief is surrendered, the appearance fades. Now, I want you to hear this gently. The problem you face today, whatever its name, whatever its form, whatever fear it evokes, has no power. It has no law to support it. It has no life to sustain it. It has no substance to uphold it. It is a shadow, an appearance, a suggestion, and the instant you turn from the appearance to the one, the instant you acknowledge within yourself that God alone is the problem, begins to dissolve in the light of your recognition. This is the revelation that changed everything. This is the foundation of the infinite way. And this is the truth that begins to set you free, not by solving your problems, but by revealing that they were never real to begin with. And now, let us look more deeply at the principle that stood revealed in that sacred moment. For without understanding this principle, spiritual healing remains a mystery, a hope, a possibility, but never a certainty. But once the principle is known, truly known, healing becomes as natural as the rising of the sun, not because you perform it, but because you align yourself with the nature of reality. The principle is this: there is one power, one presence, one life, one substance, and beside this one, there is none other. Now, this may seem like a familiar statement, for nearly all spiritual traditions affirm the oneness of God, but I tell you, few truly understand what it means to proclaim that God is one. For if God is one and if God is all, then there cannot be God in disease, there cannot be God in lack, there cannot be God in fear, there cannot be God and a human mind with power to oppose the infinite. There cannot be two powers. In fact, the moment you entertain two powers, you step out of spiritual reality and into the realm of illusion. You see, every problem in human experience rests upon this one false belief. The belief that something other than God has presence, has activity, has law, has substance, and this belief is universal. It is the atmosphere of the world. It is the hypnotism that envelops mankind. But it is only a belief, no more than a dream that claims substance until the dreamer awakens. When the revelation came that you never had a problem, it was not saying that the appearance does not exist on the human level. The shadow on the wall exists as a shadow. The storm exists as a storm. But they do not exist as powers. They do not exist as causes. They do not exist as realities that can oppose the one. The entire weight of their seeming force is born from the acceptance of a second presence, from believing that there is something other than God that can influence your life. Now listen carefully. The healing comes not when the body changes, not when the supply appears, not when the circumstance resolves. The healing comes when consciousness recognizes that only God is, and that recognition removes the belief in a second power. And when the belief is gone, the appearance has no foothold in your experience. It must dissolve, for its only life was the belief you held about it. This is why spiritual healing is not an act performed by a practitioner. It is not the application of truth to a condition. It is not the manipulation of invisible forces. Healing occurs when the practitioner rests in the realization of one presence, one power, one life, one law. And in that atmosphere of realized oneness, the false sense of discord cannot persist. Let me put it another way. If God fills all space, where is there room for anything unlike God? If God is the life of your being, what power can endanger that life? If God is your substance, what can diminish your supply? If God is the law of your existence, what external circumstance can legislate against that law? If God is your consciousness, what thought can separate you from your source? When you begin to see this, not as a statement of faith, not as a creed, but as a living perception, you will understand why Joel Goldsmith never healed a disease, never lifted a burden, never corrected a condition. He recognized that no such thing existed in the presence of the One. And it was this recognition, this pure awareness of God as all that dissolve the appearance of error in the lives of those who called for help. So take this into your heart. One power is all you need to know. The moment your consciousness embraces the truth of one, the moment it yields, even slightly, to the allness of God, the appearance of two begins to fade, and with it, the belief in the problem fades as well. You are not overcoming. You are not resisting. You are not solving. You are recognizing, and in that recognition lies the entire secret of spiritual healing, spiritual peace, and spiritual freedom. Now, having touched the principle itself, let us come down gently into the landscape of daily living, for unless the spiritual truth can be lived, it remains only a beautiful idea, soaring, perhaps, but without roots in experience. And yet, the marvel of this revelation is that it applies just as fully to the smallest detail of your day as it does to the great turning points of your spiritual journey. For the one that is God is not sometimes present and sometimes absent. The one does not appear in holy moments only to withdraw when the ordinary tasks of living arise. No. The same presence that dissolves fear in meditation walks with you as you prepare a meal, as you answer the telephone, as you sit quietly in a room alone. And it is in these ordinary moments that the realization of one power begins to take form in your practical, lived experience. Let us look, then, at the four temporal kingdoms, again, not as forces that bind you, but as opportunities to practice the awareness of the one. When the body signals discomfort, the world shouts, "This is power. This is law. This is reality." Yet, in the light of the principle, you pause. You do not fight the sensation. You do not run for remedies in fear. You do not declare affirmations in desperation. You simply remember there cannot be God and this, and quietly, without struggle, you rest in the recognition that the life which animates the body is perfect, spiritual, untouched, and in that resting, something shifts, not in the body first, but in consciousness. And because consciousness is the cause, the body follows. Then supply, a bill arrives, a job changes, an unexpected expense appears. Instantly, the world insists, "See, you are dependent on external sources. You are at the mercy of circumstances, but you know now that supply is not money, not employment, not opportunity. Supply is the activity of God expressing itself as your life." So you turn inward, not to ask, not to plead, but to acknowledge there is only God, and God is my sufficiency in all things. And then you go about your day without fear, without hurry, without mental calculation. And in that atmosphere, the outer supply arranges itself not by your manipulation, but by the law of harmony inherent in the one. Consider time. How many are enslaved by the clock, rushed, pressured, overwhelmed? Yet time is only a concept useful on the human level, but powerless over the spiritual being. When you feel hurried, you pause, even for a single breath, to remember that the eternal is your life, that the now is infinite, spacious, complete, and in that remembrance, time bends, tasks unfold smoothly. What seemed impossible becomes effortless, not because you have mastered time, but because you have stepped out of the belief that it masters you. And then the great kingdom of external forces, world events, political upheaval, economic turbulence, these seem to roar like mighty winds, demanding your fear, your reaction, your allegiance. But the moment you recognize that these forces are but shadows on the screen of collective belief, the moment you see that the one power remains untouched by human activity, you are freed, not detached, not indifferent, but centered, able to behold the world without being of it. Now understand this. These applications are not techniques. They are not methods. They are the natural expression of the consciousness that knows one power only. And because this consciousness is your true identity, every opportunity to practice becomes an invitation not to fix your life, but to reveal its spiritual foundation. This is how the realization works in daily life, not by changing the outer world, but by revealing that the outer world never possessed the authority you imagined. As you rest more frequently in the awareness of the One, you find that problems lose their urgency, events no longer dictate your peace, circumstances no longer govern your inner state. You become, in the quietest and most natural way, transparent to the presence. And through that transparency, harmony appears as your experience. And so I say to you, begin gently. When the appearance arises, whether in body, supply, time, or world, do not rush to correct it. Pause, turn within, acknowledge the One, and let the realization dawn that there is nothing in all the universe that can oppose the infinite. This alone is the beginning of freedom. And now we come to the practice, not a practice in the human sense of techniques and exercises, but the practice that arises naturally when one begins to perceive the allness of God and the nothingness of appearances. For if the revelation is true, and it is, then the entire spiritual life consists not in doing, not in striving, not in shaping conditions according to desire, but in resting, listening, and recognizing. These three movements form the heart of the infinite way, and when understood, they open the door to the very presence that dissolves every appearance of discord. Let us take them one by one. First, resting. This resting is not physical relaxation, though that may accompany it. It is not the stillness of inactivity or the passivity that waits for external change. This resting is the inner posture of yielding every attempt to solve, to manipulate, to fix, to control. It is the profound recognition that I can of mine own self do nothing. And in that recognition, the mind loosens its grip on the problem, the emotions soften their tension, and the sense of personal responsibility dissolves. Resting means surrendering the belief that your welfare depends on human thought or human effort. It is the willingness to allow God to be God, then listening. This is the central act of spiritual life, and yet it is not listening for a voice, nor for instructions, nor for guidance in the usual sense. It is listening for the presence itself, the silent, living activity of God within your own being. This listening begins when thought grows quiet, when words cease, when all mental formulation is set aside. You do not come with petitions. You do not come with desires. You come empty, receptive, open, and in this emptiness, the inner ear awakens the capacity to perceive impressions that are not born of the human mind, but of the spirit. This listening, you see, is the prayer of the infinite way, for true prayer is not speaking to God, but allowing God to speak within you. And finally, recognizing, for after the resting, after the listening, there comes a moment often so gentle you might overlook it, when the truth reveals itself. It may come as a quiet certainty, a subtle warmth, a sense of release, or simply an awareness that peace is present. And in that awareness, You recognize something, that God has always been here, that the presence has never departed, that the one power has never been threatened. In that instant, whether brief or long, whether dramatic or understated, the illusion of the problem is pierced, and the appearance begins to fall away not through your effort, but through the recognition of truth. Now I would have you understand that this practice is not reserved for times of crisis. It is meant to be woven into the entire fabric of your day. Brief pauses, moments of turning inward, times of quiet acknowledgement. You may stop for a single breath and simply say within yourself, "Thou art here," or "I and the Father are one," or no words at all, only the stillness that listens. In these small intervals, repeated many times, the consciousness becomes attuned, the inner senses sharpen, and the presence that seemed distant becomes the living atmosphere of your being. Do not imagine that you must achieve some special state. Do not imagine that long meditation is the pathway. No. Joel Goldsmith taught and lived the truth that frequent inner turning, short and sincere, brings far more realization than rare extended practices. It is the constancy, the sincerity, the returning again and again that opens consciousness to the infinite. And so, when the appearance of discord arises, you do not rush, you do not fear, you do not attempt to make truth do something. You simply rest. You listen, you recognize, and in that quiet recognition, you discover that God has already gone before you, that harmony is already established, that the solution is not forthcoming, it is present. This is the practice. This is the way, and if you will walk gently in this manner, you will find that the presence becomes a living reality, not only in meditation, but in the midst of your daily tasks. And the more it becomes real, the less the world's appearances can disturb your peace. You begin to live from the center. You begin to live by grace. And so, as this practice becomes a way of life, this resting, this listening, this quiet recognition, something within you begins to change, not suddenly perhaps, not with fireworks or dramatic signs, but with the steady surety of dawn spreading across the horizon. For the transformation we speak of is not an improvement of the human self, not a refinement of personality, not the development of spiritual powers. It is the gradual dissolving of the false sense of self, the vanishing of the belief that you are a being separate from God, striving to reach God, and in its place there emerges a new awareness, a new center of identity, a new way of seeing, one that knows itself to be the transparency for the presence, the instrument through which the infinite expresses itself. When this begins to unfold, problems no longer present themselves as emergencies. Events lose their capacity to shake you. Circumstances lose their authority. You may still witness the forms of discord appearing around you. This world is full of appearances, but they do not enter you. They do not claim your belief. They do not govern the inner atmosphere of your being. For you have discovered that your peace does not depend upon what the world does or does not do. It depends only upon your recognition of the One. You will notice, as this transformation deepens, that your reactions soften. Where once you might have hurried, you now feel no haste. Where once you might have feared, a quiet confidence arises in its place. Where once you might have condemned, compassion now flows effortlessly. You do not try to be better. You do not strain to be spiritual. These qualities unfold naturally because they are not attributes of a human person. They are the nature of the presence living itself as you. And as this unfolds, you begin to sense a subtle ongoing guidance, not a voice in the sense of human language, but a movement of intuition, a direct knowing that reveals itself at the exact moment it is needed. You may find that you are moved to go somewhere, to speak a word, to refrain from speaking, to act or not to act, not through planning, but through the effortless appearing of right action. This is the inner leading, the still small voice, the activity of God within your consciousness. And as you learn to trust it, you discover that life becomes harmonized, coordinated, organized by a wisdom far beyond your own. There will also be moments, perhaps many, when the old fears return, when the mind once again rushes to judge or to worry or to react. And in these moments, you do not condemn yourself, for condemnation belongs to the belief in two powers. Instead, you simply return to the practice, resting, listening, recognizing. You turn inward, even for a breath, and acknowledge that all power is in the invisible, not in the appearance, and each return deepens the transformation. You see, the goal is not to eliminate appearances, nor to perfect the human scene. The goal is to live from the center, from the conscious awareness of the One. And when you do, the world around you begins to reflect that inner harmony, not because you have changed it, but because you have withdrawn your belief in the forces that once seemed to rule it. You come to understand what Jesus meant when he said, "My peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth." For the peace you experience now is not the result of conditions aligning themselves. It is the peace that comes from knowing that the presence is your life, your supply, your protection, your guide, and that nothing can separate you from the activity of God being itself as you, in this transformation, you cease trying to demonstrate truth, and truth begins to demonstrate itself. You stop trying to bring harmony into the world, and harmony begins appearing wherever you are. You stop trying to heal, and healing begins happening around you, not because you have done anything, but because you have become transparent to the One who is doing everything. This is what it means to live as one who knows not intellectually, not as theory, but as experience. You walk through the world quietly, gently, peacefully, carrying an atmosphere that others can feel even if they cannot name it. Your presence lifts, your silence blesses. Your being radiates the light of the Christ, not as a power you exert, but as the natural expression of who you are. This is the transformation. This is the fruit of the revelation. This is the life lived under grace. And now, as we come to the close of this time together, let us rest for a moment in the spirit of what has been revealed, for teachings, words, and explanations have their place. But it is the impartation behind them, the presence, that has been quietly moving in and through our consciousness, that is the true substance of this message. And if you have listened, not merely with the mind, but with that inner faculty that feels truth when it is spoken, then something in you has already begun to awaken, already begun to loosen its hold on the belief in two powers, already begun to sense that divine freedom which has always been your inheritance. Let me leave you with this gentle assurance. The revelation that came to me that you never had a problem was not given for me alone. It was not a private gift or a personal illumination. It was a universal truth, a principle as available to you as the air you breathe. And if you will allow it, if you will sit quietly with it, ponder it, or simply let it pass through your awareness like sunlight through a window, it will begin to work within you. It will begin to soften the hard edges of fear. It will begin to dissolve the urgency of worry. It will begin to reveal the unreality of every appearance that has claimed authority over you. You need not grasp it all at once. You need not become a master of it tomorrow. The infinite way is not a path of hurry, nor is it a path of struggle. It is a path of awakening, of unfolding, of gentle remembrance. And every step you take toward the realization of one power is supported by the very presence you seek. You are not walking alone. You are not striving to reach God. You are awakening to the truth that God has always been where you are. So as you go forward from this moment, carry with you not the weight of a teaching, but the simplicity of a single truth. There is only God, and whenever the appearance of a problem arises, in whatever form, you need not wrestle with it, you need not fear it, you need only turn inward, even for a breath, and acknowledge the presence of one power. Let that recognition be your refuge. Let that awareness be your practice. Let that truth be the ground upon which you stand. And if you will do this softly, sincerely, without strain, there will come a day, perhaps sooner than you imagine, when you too will discover that the problem you struggled with was never there. It was a shadow, a suggestion, a passing belief. And the moment the light of truth shone upon it, it dissolved into the nothingness from which it came. This is the invitation. This is the promise. This is the freedom that awaits you. Go now in the peace that the world cannot give and cannot take away. Rest in the assurance of God's presence. Walk gently in the awareness of one power, and let the light of the Christ, which is your own true being, shine forth through you as blessing, as harmony, as peace. Thank you for this sacred time together.